Ariel Helwani, Brett Okamoto here in Houston, Texas. Time to wrap up a fascinating UFC 247 card. Main event, Jon Jones wins a razor-thin decision over Dominick Reyes. Unbelievable stuff. Unanimous decision. Most people had it scored for Dominick Reyes. In a matter of moments, I will ask him who he had it scored for, but we must mention as well Valentina Shevchenko retaining her women's flyweight title in the co-main event against Katlyn Chookagian. No controversy there. That was a very one-sided affair. But of course, the big story of the night, Jon Jones, Dominick Reyes. Jones retains the belt. He makes history, by the way. 14th victory in a UFC title fight.
Yep.
How'd you score it?
Man, I hate answering this question because it's tough. I really want to go back and rewatch this fight. And scoring is difficult in and of itself. And then trying to score it, as you know, while we're working and you're trying to do other things and take down other notes and prepare for other things, it's virtually impossible. But here's what I'll say. I thought that it probably came down to the second round. That second round is going to be razor close. And this is not a perfect answer because this is not how MMA is scored, but I feel okay leaving the arena and knowing that Jon Jones maintained his belt because he went out there and I thought he dominated the fifth round. I do feel confident about that. And I think in a close fight, are we going to give Dominick Reyes the win, you know, on a second round that is just razor close. You know, it literally split right down the middle. 50% could think Reyes won, 50% could think Jon won. Or when you get to that fifth round and the chips are on the table, Jon absolutely dominates him. Again, that is an imperfect answer because that's not how MMA is scored. But I'm just saying, as I leave the building tonight, I'm comfortable with the result.
Okay, so I actually thought the second round was pretty easy to score.
Really?
I had first, second, third for Dominick Reyes. I thought the third round was the toughest round to score.
Yep.
I thought that was the one where it got a little closer. And then fourth and fifth for Jon Jones, I thought that was relatively easy. To your point, fifth round was very easy to score.
Right.
I think it came down to the third round. In the end, I think Dominick Reyes won the fight 48-47. And I think most people that I've talked to around here scored it the same. I don't like to use the word robbery. You can say controversial, debatable, somewhat polarizing scorecards. I think we could all agree the 49-46 was a little wacky.
Yeah,
right?
that felt a little out there.
From the one judge. But I think in the end, Dominick Reyes did enough. Now, one of my biggest pet peeves as far as MMA, Twitter, and just, you know, fight sports are concerned is when people say, did he do enough to beat the champion, right?
Right.
We have to make this clear. When you score a fight, when you're a licensed judge, you don't score round by round and ask yourself right before you score the round, did he do enough? That's not how this works, right? You just look at who won the round and then you act accordingly. And so I just want to try and dispel. I know it's not going to go away, but I want to dispel this because that's a ridiculous
I hope
notion.
the actual judges are not doing that, though. I mean, to your point, Twitter, if you know, the fans are saying this, you know, that's one thing. But hopefully the three people who are actually judging the fight are not sitting there thinking that. Because I do see that sentiment all the time.
Yes.
And it's incorrect. We just got to hope that the three people who are actually in charge of doing it don't feel that way.
The other one that drives me nuts is when people say, there's no way that was a unanimous decision. It had to at least been a split. What does that mean?
It means that that those people don't understand how fights are
That one drives
scored.
me nuts. But, you know, these things, my heart breaks for Dominick Reyes, right? Because he fought his heart out, and I thought that he did enough in those first three rounds to win this fight. But in the end, like, it's another thing because I know everyone's emotional and they're talking about the fight. Jon Jones could take a punch, right? I think we learned that against Thiago Santos. We certainly learned that tonight against Dominick Reyes. And so like, let's talk about what could be next here because I don't love when a challenger gets an immediate rematch in a loss, right? You're the champ. You walk away with the belt. You should move on to the next. But in this particular case, I wouldn't hate the idea of an immediate rematch. How about you?
I don't hate the idea. And certainly, you know, looking ahead at what are the other options. I mean, that's part of the equation, right? Maybe it shouldn't be. Maybe we should just look at it on its face and say, does Dominick Reyes deserve a rematch? I would say yes, he does, but that's not how the world works. You know, what are the other options? How does that factor in? And the thing that's working in Reyes' favor is there aren't great options. You know, I think Jan Blachowicz and fighting Corey Anderson later this month, they're both very good, and they've both done the work, and they both put together the resumes that should get them a title shot. But when you're talking about getting them in front of a dominant champion like Jon Jones, there's just not a whole lot of buzz around either one of those names. It doesn't even matter what they do against each other, even if one of them has a spectacular performance. That's just not a big fight. You know, coming off of this fight, people are going to be clamoring, I think, and talking about Dominick Reyes got robbed. But I don't know. At the same time, to your initial point, a rematch for a challenger,
right?
And I do think that you know, you say that Jon Jones can take a punch, and sometimes, maybe as we're watching the fight, we don't give enough credit to Dominick Reyes because Jon Jones takes punches so well. I also think that sometimes we don't give Jon Jones enough credit for some of those just little kicks that don't look like they're anything. But a 205-pound Jon Jones, when he's kicking those legs, I just talked to Dominick Reyes, his legs are battered. He couldn't even stand up out of a chair during a 10-minute interview. So I think those are all things to take into consideration. I want to see a rematch. Do I have to see it immediately? I'll be honest, I don't have to see it immediately, but I do hope we see it at some point.
So it's interesting because I love when this happens. There's so many fight cards, but when a division is in focus for a week stretch or so, it's a lot of fun. So you have this fight, and then literally 7 days from now, we have Anderson Blachowicz 2 in Rio Rancho. So all this week, we're going to be talking about the light heavyweights. I think that's good.
Yep.
And so I think the pressure now is on Corey Anderson and Blachowicz.
Yep.
You have to go out. Like, I hate to be the guy, don't leave it in the hands of the judges. That's hogwash. But honestly, to get the people behind you, Corey Anderson or Jan Blachowicz, and I think Corey is probably a little bit ahead now because he's been trying to poke Jon and they have a bit of a history.
Yep.
If he goes out and does something spectacular in 7 days, he'll be the front runner. I think that's fair to say.
Yep.
If neither of them do something spectacular, I think we need to look back at Dominick Reyes because historically the UFC doesn't give the challenger in this close fight who lost the immediate rematch. Think back to Alexander Gustafsson, right, when he lost at 165. You could make a strong case back then, immediate rematch. He didn't get it, right?
Yep.
He didn't get it. So I think historically they don't like to do that. But if neither Anderson or Blachowicz emerges, I think you do have to look back at Dominick Reyes.
And it is interesting because I just said that I don't have to see the rematch next, but I do think a rematch would be fascinating in that, think about it. I mean, Jon Jones, he went to the cusp of defeat tonight. And so I think that that's going to force him to improve, right? I mean, a great athlete with a good team around him. They're going to make adjustments, and they're going. He even said it himself to me when I spoke to him below. Is that I'm pretty good at rematches, and so I would like to see that Jon Jones who comes out and wants to put a stamp on something. And the same thing for Dominick Reyes. This guy, it doesn't even matter if he fights Jon Jones next. He's going to be better just because he's still young in this sport. That was one thing that we were talking about just in the build-up to this fight, is that Dominick Reyes is getting better every single time, and we saw that again tonight. Dominick Reyes was the best version we've ever seen of Dominick Reyes, and if they fought again, I guarantee he would be an even better version of that. So maybe I'm talking myself even more into seeing this immediate rematch, but to your point, I think maybe I can't jump on board completely because I find myself not wanting to do the immediate rematch when the challenger loses, and we do have that fight with Corey Anderson and Jan Blachowicz, and we have to give them an opportunity at least to drum up some interest in it.
A couple things. I think most of the light heavyweights are probably licking their lips thinking that, his time is coming, right? He's never been more beatable. Jon Jones has never been more beatable. Yeah. I think maybe we pump the brakes a little bit on the move up to heavyweight,
I think so.
Right? But now, would you like to rethink your stance on the Israel Adesanya fight? Come on. You don't think Izzy versus Jon, this Jon, is a fascinating affair?
All right, don't put me in a position where I'm having to throw water on a fight that would be a lot of fun.
Right.
Izzy and Jon at a press conference talking. I mean, the build-up to it, everything is
stylistic.
Everything is great. Dominick Reyes is a former wrestler. He's a former football player. He's a big guy. I think that was one thing that stood out to a lot of us this week is that when they stood next to each other, like, oh, Dominick Reyes is pretty big. I think if Jon Jones and Israel Adesanya stands next to each other, and I think we have a situation like we had in this fight in the 4th round when Jon Jones is like, uh-oh, I'm losing the stand-up. I need a takedown. I think he's going to take down Israel Adesanya. I just think the size difference is a little bit too much. So I'm still not completely on board, but my sentiment of earlier in the week stands. Hey, if they continue to win, then sign me up. But I don't need to see it in the near future.
Okay, let's talk about what's next for Valentina Shevchenko. Again, she proves that the gap between her and the rest of the contenders is very large. What do? Is there anyone at 125, or do you really just have to look at that Amanda Nunez fight because Nunez doesn't have anyone at 135 and 145?
I mean, I'll throw it to you first.
I'm kind of changing my stance.
Amanda again this quickly?
Who is out there? Like, I can't think of, Joanne Calderwood, maybe.
I think you have to.
Just keep doing those fights.
I said the same thing about Jon this week, and I'm gonna say it about Valentina now. It's not about the names; it's about the numbers. It's almost like
just keep winning.
And that's not an ideal thing, and that's not going to get anybody watching this video all really excited about it. But sometimes that's just the nature of the status of the division, is that Valentina Shevchenko is just far better than everybody else, and so these are going to be somewhat showcase fights. It's going to be you know, the storyline is going to be how these women handle just the sheer fear of stepping in there with her. If I was a 125er, I would be looking around kind of and seeing like, well, maybe I can make 135. Maybe I can drop down to 115. And not even the man of Nunez is all that easy to beat. But I don't want anything to do with Valentina Shevchenko. But to turn around and just put it together again, I just feel like even though it's probably the right fight to make, there would still be that feeling of like we just saw this and there's just no buzz. If that is the right fight to make, let's wait for the right time to make it, because I want people to pay attention to it. That is such a good fight that if it's rushed, maybe perhaps people will be like, I'm not going to tune into this. I just saw it 2 years ago. You know, let's build it back up and give it the credit that it deserves and the spotlight that it deserves, because if they put it on now, I just don't think it's going to feel like a super fight. Yes, it'll be a fight between two dominant champions, and there is some appeal in that, but I think that that fight can get bigger, and it deserves to get bigger because it's really one of the only premier fights that they can make for those two.
Oh, fair enough. I mean, they have their work cut out for them in terms of finding an opponent, a suitable opponent for both Shevchenko and Nunez. That's why I lean towards it. But I get your point. You want to see long reigning champions. You want to see them do their thing. So, I mean, let's just give her props. It's just such a joy to watch her fight.
Man,
right?
it is a joy.
What a treat. She is just unbelievable. Great night here in Houston. Other fine performances from the likes of Dan Ige. Loved what he said to you afterwards. He's taking people's souls, so why not go after a zombie? That was pretty cool.
Hey, that was a good line from a guy who doesn't drop a lot of lines.
That was a great line from him. Well done. What about Justin Taffa with a nice victory as well? And what about Derek Lewis coming back after a bit of a slow start, getting ragdoll all over the place? So fun night here. And, of course, got to give props to James Krause. Came up short, took a fight on 20 hours' notice. How about Trevin Giles with the big win in his hometown as well? So a lot to discuss, but we are out of time. It is very late here in Houston. As you can see, they're taking down the cage behind us, so we shall say goodbye. Congratulations to Jon Jones. Congratulations to Dominick Reyes as well. An instant classic, a fun fight. Can't wait to watch it again and try to actually rescore it again and focus on it. But for now, Jon Jones is the champ. He walks away with the belt, and we shall see who is next for him. For Brett, I'm Ariel. For our entire crew, thank you so much for watching our coverage all week long from here in Houston. Good night.
Thanks for watching ESPN on YouTube. For more sports and analysis, download the ESPN app. And for live streaming and special content, subscribe to ESPN+.